Whether you're finding it, I don't know, but many people seem to be almost terrified, almost dreading somebody saying to you, so why are you a Christian? Or even, you're a Christian. And we get a bit nervous, and Peter deals with it. It's something which I'll just read to you. Peter deals with this problem in a book he wrote in the New Testament. He wrote his own book after his own name, and he says to us this. He says, do not fear what they fear, and don't be frightened. Easier said than done, by the way. But nevertheless, that's what he says. And then he gives us how to overcome this fear of being a Christian in a contemporary world in which we live. So he says, but in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. So that's the point. That's the first point that we need to do, is to really put Christ as Lord in our hearts and make a big effort to do that. And only then can we follow the bit that we all know, these words that we'll probably recognise, which is, but in your hearts set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that you have. And that's where I think we fall apart sometimes as a Christian. So what I'm going to be doing is talking about some of the questions that, although people might not actually ask outright, it often stops them from believing that there is even a God. They just can't believe it. It may not be something they want to hear from you, and actually our job is not to try and win an argument. If you keep reading what Peter says, he asks us to be humble and have humility when we're talking to others. And it isn't trying to win an argument at all. It's just to present your faith against some of these big questions. Last night I was in London in a gala evening, sat beside somebody, and I found myself giving him a statement that I would encourage maybe you to think about, which is this. If someone that you've met for the first time says, well, how are you? You say, I'm fine, thanks. Chit chat. And then they say, so what do you do? And when I get asked that question, I now say, and your faces will go very bored, I know they will, I say, well, I'm a national account manager for a finance company. There you go, you see? They've all gone bored. And I then follow that up by saying, it sounds really boring, doesn't it? So I make up for that by being interested in the very big questions of life. 9 times out of 10, the person will say, well, such as what? And I'll say, well, what do you think? What sort of big questions can you think of? And then they'll say, well, I don't know, like, how do we get here? Well, exactly. So why do you think we got here? And then they'll say, you're not a Christian, are you? And out it comes. And then the fear starts. And Peter says, don't be afraid. Have Christ as Lord and be ready for an answer. So I'll ask them, well, what stops you from being a Christian? Well, science, they'll say, has proven everything we need to know. So I thought maybe we'd start there. So we start there with that big question. Science has proven everything we need to know. Well, science, I've got to say, is brilliant. And we've learnt so much about our planet and about the universe. We really have, more than ever before. But science has its limitations. So let's just think about the limitations, and I'll pick one of these cakes. In fact, I'll pick one that Annette made. So where is it? The cake is down there, over there. So Annette made that beautiful cake. Now I could put that cake in front of Nobel Prize winning scientists and chemists, and I could ask them to describe it, couldn't I? I could. And they would describe it brilliantly. They would describe it, how it was made, what heat would be made, how the heat worked within the oven. I'm not a cook, as you can tell, but they would describe everything you could possibly imagine about that cake perfectly, brilliantly. Couldn't they? Scientific explanation. Perfect. And then before these Nobel Prize winning scientists were allowed to leave my presence, I'd say to them, could you just answer one more question for me? Why did Annette make that cake? Now, could science answer that? Those scientists, no matter how good they were, couldn't answer that question, could they? They could only answer that question if Annette told them why. So she would then say, she would reveal to them why, and she would say, well, it was for an evening of young people. Now, those scientists wouldn't just stop their reasoning at that point. They wouldn't just accept it with blind faith, and we'll cover blind faith later on. They'd have to then, because they're scientists, John, they'd have to work out, well, is that true? Is what Annette just said true? So they might phone up Andrea and say, Andrea, is there a young people's evening tonight? Oh, yes, he said. Oh, and did you ask for food? Oh, yes, I did. That's right, yes. Oh, and was there cake being made? Yes, there was. So now all of a sudden, the evidence that's being built up is proving what Annette said was true. But science didn't prove that, did it? So science is brilliant, but it does have its limitations. And also, when somebody says to me, well, Mark, science has proven everything. You don't need God. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, how can you possibly believe in a creator? I'll say, well, hang on a minute. You're still saying that science has proved everything. Well, yes. Well, okay, let's ask them another little question. And this is why this is being filmed, because you may want to replay this and listen to this yourself and practice this a little bit. Because they're very simple arguments. So here comes another one. Because it's a method of explanation. Science explains something in a particular way, but it's not the only way. So here it comes. I want you to imagine in my kitchen again that there's a pan of water boiling on the hob. And here is the question. Why is the water boiling? Now a scientist would say, well, the heat coming from the gas is conducting with the metal pan, and the heat's going through that pan into the water. It's agitating the molecules, is it? Yes, in the water, and they're going faster and faster and faster until they start to bubble so quickly, the bubbles start and the water's boiling. That's why the water's boiling. No, it isn't, I say. The water in the pan is boiling because our kettle is broken and I want a cup of tea. That's why the water's boiling. Now, which of those answers is correct?
Both.
They're both correct. One is scientific and one is an agent. And so science is beginning to prove and show lots of things about the universe, but it doesn't do away with God. It just describes to us the very clever way that God did things. Albert Einstein, one of the greatest scientific minds ever, that's arguably a fact. Probably even up higher than Stephen Hawking. That's the guy in the wheelchair. Yeah, probably Einstein. He was probably the greatest brain ever to be around, really. And when he discovered the law of gravity, he didn't say, "Oh, good, I've discovered the law of gravity, so now I don't need God anymore." No, not at all. He said, well, now I've discovered the law of gravity, that just shows me just how brilliant the God who made it that way is. So that's how I would start and sort of lead in when someone says to me, we don't really need science. God do, because science has proven everything. And so it's easy to show that science doesn't prove everything. But that then will let them jump straight into another question. And I get this a lot at work. I got a little bit with my friends, but I get this at work. And I'll just pause for a moment. If we never try to encourage the conversation, I'm not saying we need to try and be brilliant at all the answers, but just be confident in starting a little conversation like I've just done now. They're not difficult, are they, to talk about? And if it gets further and the person asks you a question that you don't know, we'll say, I don't know the answer to that. Can I come and meet you for coffee next week and I'll try and find out about it? So the conversation, just as Peter describes in his book, carries on. He doesn't talk about preaching, he talks about dialogue and talking. So if we can encourage that, it's what we need to do, really.